Now we go to the first part in a special report you'll only find here on CBS 7. Our very own Hannah Brock sat down with experts, landowners, and officials to explore one of the biggest challenges facing the oil and gas industry today. She explains the produced water problem.
The Permian Basin continues to grow. More jobs, more profits, more production, and more water. Millions of barrels of extremely salty, unusable water are generated in the Permian Basin every day. Most of it is disposed of below surface, out of sight, out of mind, until it isn't. West Texas endures the worst of the issue: overwhelming waste, earthquakes, unknown subsurface issues, and growing groundwater contamination concerns. It's the produced water problem.
If this was happening in Houston, Texas, and River Oaks or Tanglewood, the problem would have already been solved.
We can't keep making that money in oil and gas unless we figure out what to do with the water.
If we do not get a hold of it now and get on top of it now, it will be absolute ecological disaster.
I think produced water management, treatment, and reuse is likely the greatest challenge in the industry today.
So what is produced water?
It's water that already exists in the formation deep down in the earth that comes up with the produced hydrocarbons as part of the exploration operations. And in our estimation, we've got 10 to 14 million barrels a day of produced water that need to be managed.
About 3 million barrels per day are reused by the oil and gas industry. But even if the industry used every drop possible, an enormous amount of waste remains. Most of it originates in the Permian Basin. Hydraulic fracturing led to the rise in produced water volumes.
In order to remove all of the hydrocarbons from tight shale in several plays, especially in the Permian Basin, we're actually going so far below and capturing so much product. There's a significant amount of other products inside of the shale, including produced water. And so the volumes are new, but the production of water is not.
Production has changed significantly over time.
In the mid-late 1800s and early 1900s, the kind of wells that our grandparents drilled were just vertical wells into rocks with high porosity and permeability.
That means the oil was extracted more easily with conventional means. It came from geological layers like porous sandstone and flowed without as much man-made effort.
But then we ran out of those kinds of rocks. So we went to the shales and started creating our own fractures to improve the flow.
Horizontal wells grew in popularity in the 1970s and took off in the 1990s after reservoirs easily accessed by vertical wells depleted. Today, much of production comes from shale, which has tight pores.
There's tons of little interbedded sands and shells. When we create these hydraulic fractures, we're intersecting these layers.
Produced water is about 3 times saltier than ocean water.
There's really no practical industrial uses. You know, it's too salty for a farmer to use. You wouldn't want to give it to an animal, as an example, because of the salt levels. So it's a challenge for us to be able to economically treat that to make it affordable for all these other applications.
It may also include hydrocarbons, chemicals used in production, and substances scientists are still identifying. Deemed useless, the produced water is injected into saltwater disposal wells, or SWDs.
They're kind of permanent trash cans, if you will. We tried to find isolated deep formations where that water would, never need to come up from there.
But it isn't that simple.
Most of our knowledge of underground formations comes from our mapping, trying to find oil and gas. In some of these new deeper formations that we're injecting into, they're actually quite a bit deeper than the historic oil and gas formations. So we really didn't have the opportunity to characterize them that well. We're finding they can be very receptive, deep injection locations, but we're also seeing complicating factors like earthquakes that may be related to that.
In 2022, Texas had the most earthquakes in the lower 48, and far west Texas bears the most significant burden. Earthquakes have continued to increase since 2009, with a major uptick in recent years.
Our analysis of the seismicity in the state shows that all of those earthquakes, or most of them, are related to oil and gas operations. Part of it is due to hydraulic stimulation, but most of it seems to be likely connected with injection of produced water.
Founded in 2017, TexNet has rapidly grown to monitor earthquakes across the state. Fracking-related earthquakes happen nearby within hours or days. The fix? A pause in operations. Disposal-related earthquakes are another story. They happen long after injection and far from the site.
So we cannot turn off the seismicity actually as soon as we identify that the injection is the causal factor.
This brought injection restrictions from the Railroad Commission, which regulates oil and gas. They're called Seismic Response Areas, or SRAs. 3 SRAs are active in Gardendale, North Culberson Reeves, and Stanton after each area experienced a magnitude 4 or 5 earthquake. And while there are differing theories on what causes the earthquakes, each Railroad Commission response blames deep injection.
Well, the irony in this is the reason we went to deep was because we thought we needed to get away from shallow to begin with. And now we're kind of going back to that same area we were trying to avoid.
Shallow disposal wells are typically above 5,000 feet, while deep disposal goes about 8,000 to 10,000 feet below surface. Those depths vary in each basin, and there are many unknowns about those deeper zones.
The bad news is that we really don't know what's going on deep underground. We don't know if the water is staying isolated in that formation, or perhaps it's kind of slipping out, maybe even falling deeper with gravity. I am more concerned about the shallow landscape, and the reason is there's just more conflicts going on there.
The oil and gas industry's oldest infrastructure is at shallow depths. Amid high pressures from injection, Capper says abandoned, improperly plugged, and/or undocumented wells can become leaky pathways for produced water. That creates the potential for pollution of soil and water, a growing concern for West Texas landowners. Earthquakes, disposal, leaky wells, pressures, they're all becoming part of the same conversation. It isn't just an oil and gas industry problem. Every Texan has a stake in the matter, some more directly than others. We step into the shoes of landowners enduring the damages of produced water leaks. But this series doesn't stop there. We'll hear from several experts about what this means for West Texans and the researchers working tirelessly to reuse the water in beneficial ways. This month, tune in every Monday at 6 and 10. For CBS 7 First Alert News, I'm Hina Brock.